Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. I have spent more time with Xi Jinping than any other world leader. I have travelled 17,000 miles with Xi Jinping. Sounds impressive, doesn't it? That's what Joe Biden often claims. He boasts of being the most prepared leader to take on China's Xi Jinping. But almost 1 year into his presidency, Biden is already failing the China test. He met the Chinese president for the first time today, a one-on-one meeting, and the world witnessed his China policy collapse, one issue at a time. Just hours before they spoke about Taiwan, Chinese jets buzzed the Taiwanese airspace once again. Biden failed to press Xi Jinping on human rights. He did not discuss the growing protests against the Winter Games, the Winter Olympics. Neither did he demand that China come clean about the origins of the Wuhan virus. Biden and Xi discussed their differences, but they failed to come up with a plan to solve them. Then how does Joe Biden, the President of the United States, plan to contain the China threat? On Gravitas tonight, we'll tell you how Biden's China policy is already failing. Also on the show, Russia has tested an anti-satellite weapon, destroying its own satellite in space, sending astronauts at the International Space Station running for cover, and governments fuming. What's in the Mountbatten papers that the UK government does not want revealed? Why is London spending £600,000? £600,000 to keep this secret. There's a scorpion invasion in Egypt. A storm has forced thousands of creatures out of hiding. 500 people have ended up in hospital after being stung. And in the US, women are being charged with manslaughter after miscarriage. Let me repeat that. The state is jailing women who've had a miscarriage. We'll bring you the full story. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Belarus leader Alexander Lukashenko says he wants to avoid confrontation over migrants after the EU decided to widen sanctions. The situation at the border continues to worsen as Polish forces fired tear gas after migrants resorted to stone pelting along the border. India has decided to reopen the Kartarpur corridor from 17th November, ahead of the birth anniversary of the founder of Sikhism, Guru Nanak. The corridor provides visa-free travel from India to Pakistan and vice versa for pilgrims to pray at the Holy Temple of Sikhs. It was shut last year in March after India closed its borders due to the COVID-19 crisis. As tensions continue to escalate between Russia and Ukraine over the military buildup along the border, the NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg has now issued a stern warning to Russia over the military aggression. Stoltenberg cautioned Russia, saying that the Western military alliance will stand by Ukraine amid the escalating dispute. Germany's energy regulator temporarily has halted the approval process for the controversial Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline between Russia and Germany, saying the operating company is not yet compliant with German law. Twin explosions in the heart of Uganda's capital left at least 3 people dead and over 30 injured. Security forces say the suicide attacks were carried out by a domestic terror group. Thousands of protesters took to the streets of the Georgian capital, demanding that the jailed former president Mikhail Saakashvili, who is on hunger strike, be transferred to a civilian hospital. 10 members of the Georgian parliament have also started a hunger strike in solidarity with the former president. Relentless rain battered Canada's Pacific coast, forcing a town's evacuation and trapping motorists amid mudslides. Widespread power outages were also reported due to the strong winds. Europe and Asia are tackling outbreaks of bird flu, with the rising number of outbreaks raising concerns over the speed at which the virus is spreading. The poultry industry is on high alert. In previous outbreaks, tens of millions of birds were culled to prevent transmission. European champions Italy are in danger of missing out on qualification for the FIFA World Cup for the second edition in a row. The Azzurri were held to a goalless draw by Northern Ireland in their final qualifier last night to finish second in their group, and must now come through a 12-team playoff tournament. Switzerland claimed top spot in the automatic ticket to Qatar with a 4-0 win over Bulgaria. Former Yorkshire County cricketer Azim Rafiq has told a parliamentary panel that British cricket is institutionally racist.
You had people that were openly racist, and then you had the bystanders, and a lot of people watched it happen.
In an emotional testimony, Rafiq, who is of Pakistani descent, detailed how he and other players of Asian heritage were regularly subjected to racist language and treated like outsiders. The scandal has shaken English sport, and Rafiq said he hopes that his speaking out will lead to a big change in 5 years' time.
Have you ever got out of a Zoom call and felt glad it was over? I have. I'm sure you have too. I think all of us relate to the situation. Guess who is the latest member of this club? The Thank God the Call is Over club. US President Joe Biden. He had a difficult video call this morning, one of those meetings that drag on with nothing substantial at the end. This morning, Joe Biden was on a video call with Chinese President Xi Jinping. They discussed almost everything: Taiwan, human rights, trade, the pandemic, the climate crisis. Biden spoke to Xi for almost 4 hours. But he has nothing much to show for it. The White House is trying to portray it as a success. Look at the words that they've used to describe the conversation: respectful, straightforward, and open. But how did it end? No pledges to work together, no commitments to end hostilities. The United States and China discussed their differences, but they failed to come up with a plan to resolve them. So what did the meeting achieve? Biden asked for the meeting. What did he get out of it? What did they discuss? And what did they sidestep, avoid discussing? On Gravitas tonight, we'll decode the Biden-Xi meeting for you. We'll start with the optics. Biden began the meeting on a friendly note. He waved to his Chinese counterpart, and Xi Jinping waved back. The US president moved quickly to establish rapport. He reminded President Xi of the previous engagements they've had. Look at this.
Next time, I hope we get to do it face-to-face like we used to when we travel through China.
Xi Jinping reciprocated. In his opening remarks, he called Biden his old friend, and he said that he's willing to work with him.
China and the US have mutual respect, peacefully coexist, and have win-win cooperation. I am willing to work with President Biden to form a consensus and positively engage to lead China-US relations positive forward development. This is needed for the benefit of the people of both countries and is also the expectation of the international community.
With those statements, it may seem like these leaders got off on the right foot, but the bonhomie was just for the cameras. As soon as the press left, the swords were out. The differences were out in the open. The biggest flashpoint, of course, was Taiwan. Reports say both leaders spent a lot of time discussing Taiwan. Strong words were exchanged. Biden said the US strongly opposes efforts to undermine peace and stability. Xi Jinping warned Biden against backing Taiwan's independence. He said such moves are extremely dangerous, just like playing with fire. Whoever plays with fire will get burnt. This is the Chinese president speaking to the American president. You'll get burnt, he says. Then the conversation shifted to trade. Biden highlighted the quote-unquote need to protect American workers and industries from China's unfair trade and economic practices. Xi Jinping snapped back again. He told Biden that the U.S. needs to stop abusing the concept of national security to oppress Chinese companies. The next issue was human rights. Biden brought up China's human rights violations in Xinjiang, Hong Kong and Tibet. What was Xi Jinping's response? Once again, a sharp rebuke. He said, "We do not approve of interfering in other countries' internal affairs through human rights issues." And that's pretty much how the entire engagement played out. Each side had come prepared with a list of grievances. When one leader finished, the other leader started complaining. That's how they went. The Americans say they expected this, which is why they downgraded the engagement. The US, like we told you yesterday, chose to call it a meeting and not a summit. It was just a meeting, an important one nonetheless. Since taking office, Joe Biden has been wanting to sit down with Xi Jinping. So this meeting happened at his request. The question is, why did Biden ask for it when there was no hope for an agreement on anything? Washington believes there is a real threat of an armed conflict with China. Tensions have been escalating every day. So Joe Biden made an outreach and told Xi Jinping himself that the United States does not want a war with China.
As I've said before, it seems to me our responsibility as leaders of China and the United States is to ensure that the competition between our countries does not veer into conflict, whether intended or unintended. Just simple, straightforward competition.
Just simple, straightforward competition. That's Biden's China policy. But is it working? Joe Biden has been in office for almost a year now. How has he fared against China? So far, he's failed to tackle the China challenge. He has failed to hold China to account on the pandemic. In the month of August this year, the US president said that China is withholding critical information. So he ordered an investigation. It found nothing new. What has Biden managed to uncover about the Wuhan virus? Nothing. What about Taiwan? The US has not been able to offer an effective deterrence. In fact, on Monday, just hours before the Xi-Biden meeting, the Chinese invaded Taiwan's airspace yet again. The PLA sent 6 aircraft into Taiwan's air defense zone. That's how brazen China has become. On Xinjiang, the United States demanded access from Beijing. Back in October, the US and 42 other United Nations member states issued a statement. They wanted independent observers to visit Xinjiang. Beijing refused. In fact, when Xinjiang came up for discussion today, Biden failed to effectively press Xi Jinping for answers. He did not bring up the growing protests against the 2022 Winter Olympics. Remember, China is hosting the event, the 2022 Winter Olympics. Human rights groups have been calling for a boycott of the Games in China. But the American president did not think this issue was worth discussing. The pandemic, Taiwan, human rights. These are the issues where China is on the back foot. By failing to hold China to account on these 3 fronts, Biden is only appearing weak. He's allowing the Communist Party to get away with its sins. Joe Biden says the United States is locked in an intense competition with China. Well, if it is on the losing side right now. Have you heard of the tragedy of the commons? It's what happens when we treat a shared resource irresponsibly, when we profit by exploiting it, and we can't stop others from doing the same. The tragedy of the commons. Classic examples include overfishing the oceans, overgrazing public lands, and polluting the atmosphere. Now you can add space to this list. It's getting crowded up there and awfully dangerous. Let me tell you what happened on Monday. Russia conducted an anti-satellite test, ASAT. A test that generated thousands of pieces of debris and set the world on edge. Russia destroyed one of its own satellites using a weapon launched from the ground. The weapon hit the Cosmos 1408 satellite. This satellite was launched by Russia in 1982. It weighed almost 2,000 kilograms. It was lying defunct. It was orbiting the Earth at an altitude of 485 kilometers. Then Russia fired a missile and the satellite fell apart. It disintegrated into thousands of pieces. 1,500 of those pieces are traceable, so they can be destroyed. But the others are not. Some of these are the size of hand grenades. Others are the size of bullets. They're now zipping around up there, putting thousands of satellites at risk of collision. The lives of many astronauts are in danger, and the interests of several nations in peril. The test was conducted not too far from the ISS, the International Space Station, which is helping us learn about the universe. The International Space Station is behind our collective advancements in the field of science, technology, and medicine. After Russia conducted the tests, 7 astronauts on board the International Space Station, 2 of them Russians, had to take refuge inside their space vehicles. They had to run for cover. These space vehicles are docked to the International Space Station. The astronauts had to enter them because they were at risk. They were being hit by debris every 90 minutes. So they donned their spacesuits and they jumped into their spacecraft, just in case the station was hit. It was an alarming development. The astronauts are now out of danger, we're told, but the objects are still whizzing around them. Back on Earth, scientists are infuriated, as are politicians. NASA Chief Bill Nelson has issued a statement, and this is what he said, and I'm quoting, "I'm outraged by this irresponsible and destabilizing action with its long and storied history in human space flight. It is unthinkable that Russia would endanger not only the American and international partner astronauts on the ISS, but also their own cosmonauts. Their actions are reckless and dangerous, threatening as well as the Chinese space station and the taikonauts on board." The U.S. State Department has issued a statement too. It says Russia's test threatens the interests of all nations, that it jeopardizes the long-term sustainability of outer space, and clearly shows that Russia is not serious about opposing the weaponization of space. Listen to this.
This test will significantly increase the risk to astronauts and cosmonauts on the International Space Station, as well as to other human spaceflight activities. Russia's dangerous and irresponsible behavior jeopardizes the long-term sustainability of outer space and clearly demonstrates that Russia's claims of opposing the weaponization of space are disingenuous and hypocritical. The United States will work with our allies and partners to respond to Russia's irresponsible act.
He's talking about weaponization of space, something that all countries principally oppose but do not necessarily ensure. This test is a reminder of what the world faces, what future wars could look like. You see, we obsess with boundaries on land, securing them, while countries can be brought to a standstill by striking satellites in space. That's a frontier we need to guard. You see, satellite technology is baked into everything we need today. Much of modern day life depends on satellites. Today, Russia destroyed its own satellite. What happens if a country targets another country's satellite? Think of the possible scenarios. With one such strike, you can cripple critical systems. You can disrupt phone connections, shut down GPS systems, stop airlines from operating, block electronic payments, make your debit and credit cards useless, bring cable and internet networks to a halt. Basically, when you target a satellite, you can hit life and livelihoods of a whole country. Not to mention the damage you can do to its security apparatus. Today, everything is linked to satellites. Destroy them and you can take a country back to the 1800s. This is the weaponization of space. It's dangerous. And to be fair, Russia did not begin it. It's not the first country to conduct such a test. Others have done it before Russia. In January 2007, China carried out a similar anti-satellite test. It launched a ballistic missile into space which completely destroyed the Fengyun 1C, a Chinese weather satellite. The destruction created a cloud of more than 3,000 pieces of space debris. Much of it still remains in orbit and still poses a threat. Last week, in fact, there was a scare. The ISS, International Space Station, was forced to maneuver itself out of a potential collision with space junk. Junk released from this test conducted by China 14 years back. The ISS had to change its speed and raise its orbit to avoid a crash with the Chinese junk. That's another worry. Space debris poses a threat to all assets in space, and we have no way to control it sometimes. And of course, the bigger threat remains ambitious powers trying to take out each other's satellites, cripple the enemy's networks, make them vulnerable to attacks. This, like I said, is going to be the future of warfare, the fifth domain of warfare alongside land, sea, air and cyberspace. Its foundation is already being laid. So far, only 4 countries have shown their ASAT capabilities, anti-satellite capabilities: Russia, China, India and the United States. Only these 4 countries have successfully shot down their own satellites. India and the USA, they've tried to do this with caution, tried ensuring that their actions do not pose a threat to others. Russia and China, not so much. Either way, it is weaponization of space and potentially dangerous. Just imagine what will happen if non-state actors and rogue regimes developed ASAT capabilities. The consequences could be catastrophic. The bottom line is this: anti-satellite tests are problematic. Not only do they create debris that makes space inhospitable, they create weapons that can have a far more devastating impact. Our next story is the biggest headline of today. China is now the richest country in the world. It has overtaken the United States. China's net worth is now $120 trillion, $30 trillion more than that of the United States, $120 trillion. China may be the richest country in the world right now, but it's not a tag that it will be able to hold on to for very long if things continue the way they are. Because wealth is leaving China, and some of it is heading towards India. Tonight we'll tell you how Xi Jinping's policy is bleeding China and it's proving to be advantage India. India's tech sector is getting more investment than Chinese companies. There's a clear shift in the direction of foreign money. But first, let me tell you what's happening in China. The rich are losing money and their companies are losing investors. None of this is exaggeration. There's data to support all of it. Take a look at this report from October. In the last 12 months, investors in Chinese markets have lost $1 trillion. Let that figure sink in. $1 trillion lost. These investors were forced to dump Chinese stocks. Why is that? 3 reasons. Number 1, the Communist Party cracked down on big tech in China. Number 2, Beijing's decision to go after American corporate giants. And number 3, the curbs on online education. These 3 decisions wiped out $1 trillion. Beijing labeled these moves as a revolution, but they poked a big hole in Chinese markets. The result was losses. And they did not stop at $1 trillion. China's biggest companies lost $3 trillion in all. $3 trillion. The sell-off destroyed their market value. There was a time when China celebrated its businesses and its entrepreneurs. Today, it is destroying them. If the markets are in turmoil, how can Chinese billionaires stay immune? Colin Huang ran one of the biggest e-commerce platforms in China. His wealth has reduced by a whopping $27 billion. Tencent's founder Pony Ma lost $10 billion after China's crackdowns. In all, China's tech tycoons lost $87 billion due to the state crackdown. Other sectors were also affected. Zhong Shanshan is China's richest man. He runs Nongfu Spring. It's a major bottled water company. Even he could not avoid the losses. Zhong's losses amounted to $18 billion. And all of these people have only one man to blame for this. Xi Jinping, the Chinese president. He embarked on a mission to reduce the gap between the rich and the poor. And his solution was to make the rich less rich. How would he do that? Through crackdowns and regulatory scrutiny. But it's not necessarily helping the poor. Xi Jinping's decisions have led to a chain reaction, more losses for Chinese businesses and more bad news for those who run them, because they are losing investors. Foreign investors no longer consider Chinese companies as safe bets. They're taking their money elsewhere. They're turning to Indian companies. A lot of them are. The shift began in July. Foreign investors began pouring money into Indian startups and companies. The result is this. India's tech sector is getting more investment than Chinese companies. Look at these numbers from September. For every dollar invested in Chinese tech, $1.5 were invested in India. Let me show you another chart now. On every metric, Indian tech sector is performing better than China. There is a 287% increase in the value of deals. What about the number of investment deals? Compared to last year, the number of deals struck in India has jumped by 62%. In China, they grew by 47%. Investors say a large chunk of the difference is coming to India. The Chinese may boast of being the richest today, but if Beijing does not stop its crackdowns, that money is not going to stay. Considering the trajectory that China is on today, it should brace for more losses. Now here's a question. What's the cost of keeping a secret? In the United Kingdom, the number looks something like this: £600,000. That's over $800,000. And that's how much the British government is paying to hide a secret. What secret? Well, we don't know. It's a secret. The UK is hiding diaries of Lord Mountbatten and Lady Mountbatten and some correspondence between the two. Why? Because they contain explosive content, words that could possibly damage reputations and relations. Now, how many of you know who Lord Mountbatten was? His full name was Louis Francis Albert Victor Nicholas Mountbatten. That's one man's name. This man was a great-grandson of Queen Victoria. He was a royalist, and like every proud royal, Mountbatten went on to serve the Royal Navy. He commanded the Navy during the Second World War. He held various positions in the British Raj. Mountbatten also became the last Viceroy of India. It's in India that his story becomes very interesting. It was in Delhi in the year 1922 that Mountbatten met a young woman. Her name was Edwina. The two fell in love. They flirted at Humayun's tomb, saw the Taj Mahal together. They decided to get married. Their marriage was messy. The two saw other people. They had affairs, but showed up together at social events as a perfect couple. The Mountbattens' complex marriage was no secret, by the way. So what is it that the British government is trying to hide? One of Lady Mountbatten's many close friends was Jawaharlal Nehru, a man who would go on to become the first Prime Minister of India. In one of her letters to Nehru, this is what Edwina writes, and I'm quoting from the letter. "I hated seeing you drive away this morning. You left me with a strange sense of peace. Perhaps I have brought you the same." "Life is a dreary business," replied Nehru. The Mountbatten papers are a treasure trove. There's history and a lot of scandal. So a few years back, when one author, Andrew Lowney, asked for unrestricted access to these papers, he got a big, bold no. But Lowney was not going to take no for an answer. He cited Britain's Freedom of Information law, and he forced the government to release the Mountbatten papers, at least 99.8% of them. What about the remaining 0.2%, 0.2%? That the government will not disclose. What's in them? Documents from the years 1947 and 48. This includes diaries of Lord and Lady Mountbatten and some correspondence between the two. You see, this couple had a habit of putting unfiltered thoughts to paper. Both maintained diaries, both poured their hearts out in letters. Here's what Lord Mountbatten writes to his wife in 1942. Edwina Darlingist, that's what he called her. "I feel terrible having had to desert you twice during the most trying week of your life. I'm afraid, as I once told you before, you shouldn't have married a sailor. I'm not particularly fond of saying nice things, and I can't hope to compete with most of your other admirers. But this time I felt that I must say that I thought you were really grand and very sweet and lovable." Even on the busiest of days, Mountbatten made it a point to at least jot down pointers in his diary. On the 15th of July, 1942, for example, Mountbatten documents lunch with Charles. Thursday, 2nd July 1942, lunch with Charles. Meeting with Prime Minister and Cabinet. What the British government is hiding are documents from around the time of Indian independence. That's the 0.2% that they do not want to share. Mountbatten had overseen India's partition. His diaries could reveal details that Britain is not comfortable sharing. They may have Mountbatten's view of Nehru, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Mahatma Gandhi or Cyril Radcliffe. That's the man who drew the boundary between India and Pakistan, Radcliffe. Say Mountbatten's diary says, lunch with Radcliffe. That could mean Mountbatten interfered with the partition, perhaps, or contributed to the communal riots. If Mountbatten's diary says, for instance, that he dined with Nehru without Jinnah, could that send the message of bias? So the United Kingdom is choosing to bury these papers. It is paying £600,000 in a court battle with the author, just so that some skeletons remain in the British closet. Because if they tumble out, some horror stories of the British royal family could be out in the open. Mountbatten was not just close to the royal family, he was the royal family, remember, and a very influential member of it. Mountbatten was the maternal uncle of the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip. He was a father-like figure to Prince of Wales, Prince Charles. The two were very close. Mountbatten is believed to have played a big role in Prince Charles's personal life, be it his affair with then-girlfriend Camilla Parker Bowles or his marriage with Diana. The royal family lovingly called Mountbatten Uncle Dickie. They knew about his habit of maintaining a diary. They too had their documents. But who in the royal family would have thought that Uncle Dickie's diaries would one day start draining public coffers? So far, the UK has spent over $800,000 trying to protect them, trying to hide Mountbatten's thoughts from the world. Some reports say the British government is concerned that if revealed, the papers could jeopardize India-UK ties. I really wonder what's in those letters and papers. We'll wait. For the moment, we'll look at what's happening in Libya. A decade after the fall of dictator Muammar Gaddafi, Libya still remains a failed state. A presidential election in this December, was supposed to change Libya's fortunes. That may not happen. The election is already being called a farce because of the candidates. One of them happens to be the son of Gaddafi. He's being challenged by a controversial general accused of war crimes. Here's a report.
10 years ago, a revolution toppled Libya's long-time leader, Muammar Gaddafi. A decade of chaos and violence followed. Now an heir of Gaddafi is promising to fix the mess. Saif al-Islam. For almost 10 years, he was out of public view. But now, Saif al-Islam wants to bring his family's name back into mainstream politics. He has announced his candidacy for the presidential elections in December.
O God, open between us and our people with truth, and you are the best of conquerors, and God is dominant over his affair, even if the unbelievers hate it.
Saif al-Islam is 49 years old. After his father was toppled, he was captured by local militia in 2011. He was sentenced to death, but kept in captivity for 6 years and then released. Just like his father, Saif al-Islam is a controversial man. The International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant in his name. He has been accused of committing crimes against humanity during the 2011 protests that eventually led to the Libyan revolution. Saif al-Islam faces charges of murder and persecution. The Libyan prosecution also has an arrest warrant in his name. But these charges didn't stop him from filing his nomination. All was going well for Saif al-Islam until a challenger emerged. Renegade military commander Khalifa Haftar entered the fray too. He is the head of the self-proclaimed Libyan National Army and a former asset of America's Central Investigation Agency, or the CIA. Just like Saif, Haftar is a controversial figure. He is wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes, but still enjoys the backing of Russia, Egypt and the UAE. Haftar's critics say that he wants to establish a military dictatorship once again. But Haftar has promised to uphold democracy.
Our country today stands at a crossroads. There is no third path, only two. One is the road towards freedom, independence, peace and progress. The second is the road towards stress, conflict, sabotage and corruption. You alone, after bitter experiences, have to choose which path. If I am able to take the presidency through your freedom, then my mind will be filled with endless ideas. And with the help of the country's men and women, we will be able to achieve things that meet your dreams, reaching prosperity and progress.
After a period of tensions and violence, a United Nations mandated election was supposed to restore peace in Libya. But with the entry of divisive figures as presidential candidates, it looks like peace might continue to elude Libyans. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Last week, there was a scorpion invasion in Egypt. It was accompanied by a fierce storm. It all happened in the city of Aswan, the largest city in southern Egypt. Aswan was hit by heavy rain, thunder and flash floods. This drove hundreds of scorpions out of their burrows into the homes of the residents of the city. What happened next? The scorpion stung hundreds of people. 500 ended up in hospital. And now we've come across stories of wild scorpion attacks, but 500 people getting stung in one night is unheard of. Egyptians are drawing all sorts of parallels. They're comparing it with biblical plagues. Here's a report.
Egypt is a mysterious place. And no, the puzzling pyramids of Giza are not the only reason. What makes Egypt mysterious are also stories like these. 500 people getting stung by scorpions. This happened in Aswan, the largest city in southern Egypt. Last week, the city was hit by a fierce storm. There was heavy rain, thunder, and flash floods. It sent the people of Aswan scurrying for dry land from their mud brick houses. Awaiting them at home were some deadly guests. Hundreds if not thousands of fat-tailed scorpions with their tails full of toxic venom. They'd been swept from their desert burrows by the rains. They burst into homes through cracks in the walls. On Friday night alone, the scorpions stung a total of 503 people. All of them had to be treated with anti-venom. Some of them are still hospitalized with symptoms of fever, pain, sweating, muscle tremors, and diarrhea. As for the scorpions, they've disappeared back into their burrows. An estimated 31 species of them live in Egypt. This includes the Androctonus, which are thought to be the deadliest scorpions on Earth, and the so-called death-stalker scorpions, which sting dozens of Egyptians each year. But 503 bites in one night is unheard of, that too on a day of incessant pouring. The news may sound like the story of a biblical plague, but it has a modern explanation: climate change. The rains in Aswan have been the heaviest in 7 years, but rarely have residential areas been flooded, that too with scorpions. Egyptian meteorologists say it's all connected to climate change, which has hurt Egypt's olive and date harvests, turned vast swaths of farmland into desert, and now it is causing rainstorms in a desert city with scorpions on the loose. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Before we wrap tonight's show, I want to introduce you to someone. Meet Brittany Pulo. She's American, all of 21, and currently in jail. This is her mugshot. What did Pulo do? She lost her unborn child. She had a miscarriage. She was 15 to 17 weeks pregnant. Instead of helping her battle the grief, the United States convicted Pulo of first-degree manslaughter, sentenced her to 4 years in jail, and put her behind bars. FYI, manslaughter means murder. The United States has convicted a mother of murdering her unborn child. Apparently, the United States thinks mothers are capable of such cruelty. It has already put Pulo behind bars, and now the superpower is coming after more mothers. Reports say between 1971 and 2020, America has punished at least 1,600 women for losing their pregnancies. Women were punished for falling down. Women were punished for giving birth at home. Women were also punished for losing an unborn child after consuming drugs. Here's a thought. Why not educate Americans on drugs instead? Wouldn't that be more helpful? Sure it will, but cracking down on devastated mothers is the easier option. At least 38 American states have something called fetal assault laws. They're meant to protect pregnant women, punish those who abuse pregnant women. But in many cases, these laws are also used to punish pregnant women, punish mothers who lose their fetuses. In California, 2 women were jailed for allegedly killing their stillborn babies. Both women tested positive for drugs, so the fetal assault laws were used to punish them. Critics say American laws on fetal abuse are ambiguous. Conservative prosecutors often use these laws to whip women whose behaviors do not align with convention. Pulo, too, had admitted to taking drugs, so America cracked down on her. Had she not suffered a miscarriage, America would have called Pulo's baby a crack baby. That's the term the US uses to mock babies born to mothers with drug problems. You see, women who have a drug problem need to be looked after and treated, just like men who have drug problems. But the US chooses to put mothers behind bars, as if miscarriages are not painful enough. So mothers should be punished for their own loss. Today there is a countrywide wave in America, a trend to deny women the rights to their bodies. We already know what happened in Texas. It passed the heartbeat bill. Texas has banned abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy. That's before most women even know that they're pregnant. In Mississippi, abortion is banned after 15 weeks of pregnancy. Lawmakers in Louisiana have approved a similar law. Arkansas has banned all abortions. Only medical emergencies are an exception there. In New Hampshire, lawmakers voted to ban abortion after 24 weeks. There is no exception for rape or incest. Missouri had passed a law banning abortion after 8 weeks of pregnancy. Montana passed several bills restricting access to abortion. In Idaho, abortion has been banned after 6 weeks of pregnancy. Again, that's before most women even know that they're pregnant. This is the United States of America. It likes lecturing the world on human rights, pointing fingers at other countries, other leaders, crying human rights abuse, slapping sanctions. Here's a thought. Why doesn't Washington look inwards this time, acknowledge the mass human rights abuses happening in its own land? Shouldn't the torchbearer of human rights protect the rights of its own first? America is becoming the second El Salvador. In El Salvador, abortion laws are among the strictest in the world. Abortion is banned and doctors are required to report women who they suspect have had an abortion. See, it's very simple. Abortion rights are human rights. No mother wants to harm her child. No mother in her right mind will ever think of falling down on purpose to kill an unborn child or take drugs to kill the child she's been carrying. Mothers are not capable of such cruelty. So America needs to open that blindfold, get a new perspective on what's pro-life. A miscarriage is painful as it is. Abortions are hard enough. Washington can spare mothers the added pain. With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching.